everything, reminding you that something that Valkyrie and I put in the document, and coming back to what Brian just said, and relating it to what Marilia raised as well, how we are subjects inserted in the different discourses that produced us, right? So whatever we learn from our undergraduate courses, our graduate courses, what the bibliographies that we produce, we're using a Borgian term, we're the products of our libraries, right? So the important thing when we're suggesting critical literacy is to reflect on this. And one of the things we suggest in the national document, I think this was an example that we gave, is, and this is why we say, don't just teach English. Think about what English as a foreign language means to you in your region. What are the resources that you have? And we offer the possibility, for example, that if you're in a region where English isn't used, that's no reason to throw it away. But what is English as a foreign language? And what's the educational importance of learning a foreign language? Learning how the fact that people think differently, organize the world differently in different places. Right? And this is an important educational contribution. So we even suggest, Valkyria, correct me if I'm wrong, something like, this doesn't mean if English is not used, then you don't teach conversation. I'm coming back there to orality now. Just because my students will never speak English, therefore I'll throw away conversation, which was what the previous curricular proposal suggested. Let's teach everyone reading only and instrumental English. Yes. So what we try to suggest is that there is this possibility that it's just teaching your students how to pronounce something in a foreign language, whatever foreign language it is. We are English teachers, a foreign language for us means English. Right? Give them the taste of what it feels like using your biological constitution. This is what Diana referred to, the connection between the biological and the cognitive. What does it feel like to pronounce in your mouth a foreign, a sentence in a foreign language or foreign word? How does it feel like? What does it taste like? Right? How does it feel like pronouncing something or saying something differently to what you have learned to say? That's already an important cognitive and educational contribution. Right? Yeah, exactly. Put yourself in the position of the other without ever being able to put yourself in that position, but try to see what it feels like. Right? Reaching out. Right? This is so it's not going back to all of the. We try to break away, and Valkyria doesn't come from applied linguistics library, and I don't come from an educational library. So this is where we put our libraries together and came up with something else. Right? So, just to say that all hope is not lost. Okay? Would you like to say something?
Sure. I was going to answer Roberto's comment. Okay. So,
okay.
Just very briefly in response to Roberto's comment, I don't know whether this project has a busy and heavy agenda. But I think there are other dimensions of engagement that could be thought of. One is the trend that Lula is pushing toward more South-South engagements, and that's happening in the field of cultural studies as well, in very interesting ways. There was a recent call from the Association of Cultural Studies for researchers in the Global South to focus on production of new media, not on your students doing videos or blogs, but on the production and distribution of so much of the media that we're exposed to these days, rather than just focusing on reception. And I think that there has been a bit of a tendency in the project so far to focus on reception, the way in which we read or interpret materials produced by others, or the way in which we produce our own materials as a response to the materials of others. But I think it's important to remember that new media is an industry as well, and new technologies are an industry. And they're an industry that are reshaping our communities and our modes of connecting in some really important and complex ways. We know that with films, for example, the Australian film industry thriving in the 1920s, the Canadian film industry, were shut down by the United States film industry by buying up distribution rights to their films and then refusing to distribute them, so that the only films available to be viewed and watched were American films from Hollywood. And that same kind of strategy can be employed nowadays in all kinds of ways to close off markets as well as open up markets. So I think if you're thinking about digital literacy and new media studies, you can't afford to ignore the business and economic dimensions of these questions. So those are just two other areas that could introduce some friction to answer Roberto's very interesting question.
You want to say something?
I'll just add something to that. On another note, the musical note, it's actually interesting that the Canadian government at what time, in terms of distribution, demanded and legislated 33% of the Canadian distribution of media, music, had to be by Canadians. And the effect of this has created an entire Canadian music industry. So again, it's really interesting to see these kinds of interconnections between creativity, production of texts, the Diana, and the role that governments actually can be, and governments intervene in the case, what a contrast from the film industry in Canada, where there's such a small opportunity of ever seeing a Canadian film in the theater in Canada. You have to turn on your radio and you have to hear Canadian music. You might be in the middle of the night sometimes to meet the 33% quota, but it's there. And it's created all these opportunities for creative production of texts in new media.
Let me just say something about Roberto's comments or question. In terms of, do I understand that you want to know about our possibility of, let's say, opening up for more disciplines, for example, engaging in this kind of project?
For example, the fact that we have Brian and Kathleen here this year, as opposed to last year, and it has already changed the way the group works and things. So I think that this idea of always creating friction, always in the sense that, and those things that Nara talked about, the idea of sort of stimulating a certain feeling of discomfort. So yeah, I think the moment we tend to get too comfortable and feeling that everybody's doing well and happy, maybe it's time to do something to because the idea of reducing of being critical, I think has to be that was.
Yeah, let me just add something. That some people ask us whether we're going to open up to more disciplines. That's why I thought that you referred to this possibility. I tell you that we have a few colleagues from mother tongue, from the mother tongue area, working with us already. But then that would be something else. That would be very, very good. And I think that many. I've worked with colleagues in other areas, in the area of biology, math, some others, and I think they've been doing a very interesting job and very similar to what we do, but they don't call it new literacies or literacies, and they don't name it the same way. But they've been doing a very interesting job. So people in the other areas have already been concerned about changes and about what's been changing in education. So. But we have to work in a small scale, I think,